He laid the envelope beside my plate. Same envelope, same table, same folding crease, tight and silent. It was always $120, grocery money for the week, no receipt, no card, just cash. It wasn't handed to me, never was, because handing implies partnership. This was a drop-off, a payout, a reminder. If I needed more, I had to submit a request, explain, justify. And justification came at a cost: interrogations, accusations, revoked access. He never yelled. He didn't have to. He had systems. Every dollar came with a condition, not printed, not spoken, but always understood. He didn't hand me money. He dropped it. Every drop was a test of obedience. My name is Nora Weller. I'm 34. We live in Arbor Ridge, Illinois. On paper, I'm a homemaker. Before marriage, I was a financial systems auditor at Finch & Caldwell. I ran audits on multinationals. Now I measure grapes and coupon clip for sport. He calls it a simpler life. I call it asset erasure. The week we married, he changed all credentials, joint accounts, tax portals, document storage. He said it was for security. He used to say we. Now he said I. I streamlined. I merged. I updated. He would show me the dashboards, then quickly minimize them. He'd let me peek at our balances like I was a child watching the oven window, and then he built the wall. I noticed the calendar sync stopped first, then the text alerts vanished. Eventually, even the shared credit card flagged my login attempt as unauthorized. I wasn't locked out, I was phased out. He made it feel gradual, like erosion, subtle, calm, nonviolent, just enough ambiguity to make me question myself, but I was still watching. He liked to place things in my line of sight: open mail, unfiled contracts, sticky notes with strange initials. Each item said nothing, but together they said everything. I filed them all, digitally, privately, and with tags. Then came the fingerprint, a red smudge, lipstick, on the envelope flap one Sunday. It wasn't mine. He didn't notice. He never looked down after dropping it. That night, I left the envelope untouched, just stared at it, like a corner piece of a puzzle I already knew the shape of. The next morning, I tried logging into our tax filing software. Access denied. When I asked, he smiled and said, "Oh, I moved it to a family vault. I'll add you later." He never did. He spoke like a fiduciary, not a husband. He issued statements, not answers. Asked rhetorical questions like, "Do you really want to stress over spreadsheets again?" Then answered them himself. He told our friends I was happy to step back. I nodded. They smiled. I smiled. The silence was social currency. He spent it liberally, but I was still fluent in systems. What he forgot is that I designed internal audits for companies 3 times the size of his. He thought passwords were barriers. He forgot about metadata. He started spending more. Trips for business, gifts for clients, charges for consultants I never met. The receipts always came to our house. He assumed I didn't read them. He assumed wrong. I created a tracking sheet, simple columns, no formulas, date, amount, vendor, irregularities. He sat across from me at dinner, complaining about margins, about belt tightening. Meanwhile, receipts told a different story. His company's liquidity? It flowed into restaurants I'd never seen, floral shops that didn't deliver to this house. He thought I didn't notice. I logged every one. The first real shift happened in October. He forgot to lock the home office. Inside, his whiteboard had a project roadmap, expansion plans, a list of investors, margin targets. One name stood out: Carmichael Holdings, a dummy firm I'd seen before, registered 2 years earlier by me. He had copied the structure I'd once taught him. and assumed I wouldn't remember. He didn't know that name was a test. I waited, quiet, still. The final fracture came with the wine. It was Tuesday. He made dinner, asked if I wanted a glass. I said no. He poured it anyway and said, "You always say no when you mean yes. That's why you need me." He smiled, walked away. I didn't drink it. I didn't pour it out. I left it, watched the sediment settle. Then I opened the linen closet, pulled down an old hat box, and removed my backup drive. Booted the laptop I hadn't touched in 3 years. No cloud, no sync, no records, just clean, cold storage. I started a new file, labeled it Detachment Plan V1. I typed in one line, Entity, Shellco Partners, LLC, Delaware Registered Owner, Confidential, Purpose, Targeted Acquisition, Strategic Containment. This wasn't panic. This wasn't rage. This was arithmetic. He told everyone I retired. That was the word he used at dinner parties, over champagne toasts, and in passing introductions. After the wedding, Nora decided to take a step back from finance. She's enjoying a quieter life now. Retired at 32. I never said the word myself, but silence is often mistaken for agreement. He liked that. He used it. He was careful about optics, public praise, private control. He posted about our partnership while managing our accounts like I was an employee on probation. He kept calling me Mrs. Weller, like I'd won a title. But titles don't come with rights. They come with restrictions. When I stopped receiving bank statements, I asked if he switched to paperless. He said he'd look into it. He never did. When the investment login failed, he said, "I'll reset it, no big deal." He never did. When I noticed a new life insurance premium drafted from our account, he laughed and said, "Probably just updated your info." He didn't say why. I made a list that night. Columns, color-coded, each one labeled Request, Response, Follow-up, Status. The last column stayed red. My knowledge became threat level, so he compensated. He bought me luxury, a $4,800 coffee machine, a handbag I never asked for, a spa package in a town I didn't want to visit. "I want to spoil you," he'd say. And I'd nod, because that's what prisoners do when the warden offers dessert. But I kept notes. Old colleagues would email occasionally. "Miss your brain in the room? Still in the game? I've got a side project if you ever want in." I never responded, but I archived everything. Then one day, while cleaning out a drawer, I found my old key fob from Finch and Caldwell. It was deactivated, useless, except it reminded me that I once had access, and that I could rebuild it. That night I reactivated my LinkedIn, quietly. No profile picture, no headline. Just one setting changed. Open to opportunities. Private. Within a week, I got a message. "Hey, stranger, thought you vanished. Still lethal with numbers?" It was Mark. He was discreet, smart, and owed me a favor. I asked a simple question. If I wanted to move assets under the radar, what's the cleanest way? He didn't ask why. He just answered, "Delaware LLC, unlinked email, crypto-seeded initial fund, and never use your real name for the signature." I started sketching outlines. 1 shell company, then 2. He thought I was meal planning. I was modeling acquisitions. He thought the receipts on my desk were from groceries. They were bank wires from a consulting project I ghost wrote under an alias. I turned his rules into my fuel. He taught me the power of silence. Now I would return the lesson, but with compound interest. The first error he made was underestimating repetition. He believed habits made me complacent. They didn't. They gave me data. Every Tuesday, he reviewed vendor invoices on his iPad, wine in hand. Every Thursday, he authorized wire transfers from our business account. Every Friday, he printed spreadsheets he didn't understand. I used to sit quietly at the breakfast bar while he worked, sipping tea, asking nothing. But I watched. I tracked. He favored two subcontractors, WellerTech Logistics and SlatePoint Consulting. Neither had websites. SlatePoint's address was a P.O. box. I ran both names through open corporates. Nothing. Then I ran the EINs he'd left visible once. Bingo. Shell companies, formed by him, in his name. Money laundering, but on a small scale. Enough to hide personal spending inside corporate deductions. Classic structure. Expense the Rolex as a consultant bonus. I noted it. I didn't act. Yet. Then he made a second mistake, forgetting I taught him the game. When we met, he was a mid-level accounts manager. I helped him streamline vendor reviews, kill inefficiencies, pitch smarter. He took those skills, my skills, and leveraged them into a business. And once he no longer needed the source, he cut it out of the budget. He used to call me his edge. Now I was just the wife. Until one day I walked past the office and heard him speaking on Zoom. She's great for appearances. Investors like the married angle. Makes me look stable. I stood outside the door for 7 minutes. Didn't cry, didn't flinch, just filed it. That night I opened a new spreadsheet. Shellco Phase 2, Weller Group Acquisition. By then, Shellco Partners was fully formed. Delaware registered, anonymous trustee. Bank account seeded with my first 6 months of ghost consulting income. But I needed more. I needed someone who could structure a buyout offer that looked both neutral and desirable. Enter Clarice Toma, corporate attorney, quiet, lethal, female. She handled separations for private equity firms with more scandals than board seats. I asked her for a hypothetical. If I wanted to buy a company without the owner knowing it was me, how would I do it? She replied, "Is the owner stupid, arrogant, or desperate?" I said, "All three." She smiled. "Then you're fine." She drew up a pipeline: dummy buyer, investment fund, broker firm, Shellco, acquisition, all funded quietly, all layered, all legal. I paid her in crypto. She never asked why. Meanwhile, at home, he kept printing documents on the shared printer. He forgot it backed up everything to a local folder. I reviewed his board meeting slides while he slept. One note caught my eye. Sell 30% equity to reduce overhead liability. He was bleeding cash. Perfect. I circled a date on the calendar. Then I waited. It started with a name, Morrow Equity, a boutique investment firm, newly incorporated, clean history, respectable enough to bait him. On paper, they were based in Chicago. In practice, they were Clarice, me, and 3 silent proxies. We dressed it well. The outreach email was flattering. The pitch deck was polished. The valuation was generous, intentionally inflated by 15% to trigger ego greed. He responded within 24 hours. Excited to talk more, always open to strategic partners. He CC'd his assistant and proposed a call next week. Clarice handled the first meeting. He thought she was a junior analyst. She let him talk. He bragged about his growth, about his systems, about how he'd bootstrapped from nothing, never once naming me. He even mocked a former finance girl who left spreadsheets for slow cookers. Clarice said, "She sounds like a visionary." He didn't get it. After that call, Clarice called me directly. "He's hungry," she said, "and stupid. We can move faster than planned." We drafted the letter of intent within 48 hours. Offered to buy 60% of Weller Group's operational division. Came with a non-disclosure clause and a one-time signing bonus. It looked clean. It was clean. Except for the name on the wire. He signed within the week. He never asked about the parent fund. He never asked who really owned Morrow Equity. He didn't even read the footnotes because he was too proud, too sure, too blind. At home, he was unusually cheerful, said he felt rejuvenated, bought a new espresso machine for the office, booked a golf weekend to celebrate a liquidity win. He even kissed my forehead while I was chopping vegetables. "Glad we're finally past the hard part," he said. I nodded, because we were. I used that weekend to finalize the transfer. Clarice moved the remaining shares into Shellco. I became the primary stakeholder of Weller Group's back-end division. He still didn't know, because I hadn't told him. Yet. But I had booked the meeting. 9 a.m. Tuesday, boardroom, video conference, full executive suite present. He thought he was joining to discuss investor strategy. Instead, he walked into a screen that read, "Notice of termination, effective immediately." Clarice delivered the news, calm, neutral, precise. "Mr. Weller, the new majority owner has elected to restructure operations. Your role is being dissolved as part of this transition." He blinked. "I am the majority owner," he said, confused. Clarice didn't smile. "Not anymore." Silence, then rage. He demanded to speak to the buyer. Clarice said, "They prefer not to engage directly." He slammed the laptop shut, came home early, didn't speak, didn't eat. That night I watched him sit in silence. Same table, same envelope. He didn't lay it beside my plate. He left it on the counter. I didn't touch it. I just opened my laptop and logged in. Shellco dashboard, Weller Group access, profit and loss reports. He used to show me dashboards. Now I owned them. The call came 3 days later. He was in the driveway, pacing. I watched from the upstairs window as he yelled into the phone. His back was turned, but his hand gestures told the whole story. He was losing control. Fast. I'd timed everything. The buyer, me, had halted all executive access pending the ownership transfer audit. IT credentials were revoked. Company cards were frozen. Vendors were notified of a new point of contact. His assistant resigned without notice. And his board seat? Removed through a unanimous proxy vote, one he had signed over, buried in a 27-page document. Page 19, Clause 4.2, Assignment of Temporary Authority. He never read it. He came inside eventually. Didn't speak, didn't make eye contact. I made tea like I always did, same cup, same silence. When he finally broke it, his voice was quieter than usual. "Do you think I'm being punished for something?" I didn't answer. He looked at me, desperate to reclaim his role as the one who knew things. I can't figure out who's behind it," he said. Pause, then softer. "You'd tell me if you knew, wouldn't you?" I held his gaze and lied with ease. "Number I wouldn't." He blinked. That was when the panic started to set in. Real panic, not anger, not control, doubt. I walked upstairs and opened my encrypted drive, logged into the Shellco client portal, watched as the Weller Group's main checking account redirected its routing, then closed the tab. That night, I transferred a portion of the remaining funds into a personal account under my birth name, not Nora Weller, not even Nora, the name I hadn't spoken in 8 years. He never thought to ask what name I kept on my original degrees, or my certifications, or my backup identity verification. He never knew because he never needed to, because I was never supposed to have anything of my own. But now I had it all. The next morning, I scheduled a courier. Inside the envelope, the final dissolution papers, a separation notice, and a check with the settlement amount he thought he'd be fighting me over for years. It wasn't a fight. It was a finish. He received it 2 days later. I didn't watch him open it, didn't read his response. Because there wasn't one. Because when you take everything from a man who measured love in limits, the loudest revenge is quiet removal. He didn't know the buyer, he didn't know the lawyer, he didn't know the fund, but they all knew me, and none of them would ever return his calls. The first press release went out the following week. Weller Group acquired in private equity consolidation deal. It ran in 3 mid-tier outlets, picked up by 2 more. The language was sterile, no names, no drama, but one line stood out. Founder to exit under standard dissolution terms. No future executive role planned. I watched him read it. He scrolled past the headline, then froze, read the paragraph 3 times, closed the laptop, opened it again. He didn't ask me about it, didn't accuse, because somewhere in that moment he understood. I was gone long before I left. The home became a museum of his control, neat, lifeless, curated for optics. He stopped organizing dinners, stopped replacing the flowers, stopped pretending. He never asked where I went on Wednesdays. He never noticed the new lockbox under my desk. He just stopped. I rented an apartment under the name Marin Keys. 2 bedrooms, north-facing windows, no shared walls. The furniture was modular. The color palette was slate and ivory. Nothing that looked like him. I met Clarice there twice. We talked about dissolving Shellco, redistributing the equity, and structuring asset insulation. She said, "You've got a clean exit." I said, "I'm not done." She raised an eyebrow. "You want him to know?" I shook my head. "I want him to doubt everyone forever." Because the best revenge isn't knowing. It's not knowing who knew. It's suspecting the barista, the mail carrier, the banker, his best friend, his brother. It's wondering how many people looked him in the eye while working for me. The day I filed the final ownership change, I logged in under my real name. Marin Keys disappeared. Shellco was absorbed by a trust. Clarice stepped down. I became the face. Just for a second. Because now I didn't need to hide. He did. 3 weeks later, I passed him downtown. He didn't see me, didn't recognize me. I had cut my hair, worn a different coat, smiled in a way I hadn't in years, freely. He was hunched over, talking into a phone, explaining something. They blindsided me. I built that company. The person on the other end wasn't buying it. I could hear it in his tone. I kept walking. When I got home, I deleted the last shared folder we ever used, labeled Weller Home Budget 2020.xlsx. It asked if I was sure. I clicked yes. I left the house on a Monday, no announcement, no suitcase, no ceremony. I walked out wearing the same coat I'd worn the day he made me justify a grocery receipt for $11.87. It had torn inside the sleeve from where I gripped the cart too tight that day. I never fixed it. Some scars are more honest when they're visible. I left a key on the counter. No letter. No explanation. He would spend the next month calling the lawyer. He'd discover the prenup hadn't protected him like he thought, because while he was controlling the household budget, I was building the exit terms into a trust. It had 3 signatures. He'd only seen one. He once told a friend over drinks that I wasn't wired for war. He was right. I was wired for precision. It took me 1,106 days from the first locked debit card to full ownership transfer. Every spreadsheet, every invoice, every identity I created, it all served one purpose: to make sure when I left, he couldn't follow. He still emails sometimes, not to apologize, not to confess, to ask if I know who did it. He phrases it like a riddle. Crazy how fast things shifted. Any idea who that group really was? I don't respond, because closure is a privilege, and he earned none. The last time I saw him, he was sitting in the back of a WeWork cafe, trying to explain Series A metrics to a 20-something in a hoodie who wasn't listening. I walked past. He didn't look up. He doesn't recognize silence as a verdict, but it is, and I am no longer available for cross-examination.